Dexter Resurrection, Season 1, Episode 10, titled And Justice for All. There is a particular kind of category of finale which ties up all loose ends that have been explored over the course of a season, and it honors the themes, characters, and overarching story arcs. Of this category, this finale is a shining example. It is satisfactory, there's nothing you can really point at and criticize too much beyond saying, I wish they had gone deeper into exploring that particular plot thread, which in and of itself is a victory. I'm speaking specifically at this moment about Don Fremdt, aka the New York River. I understand why they did not give any facial information as to who that could be, because it leaves the door open. Maybe they themselves do not know who that really is, or they want to delay that. I can entertain both possibilities equally because they've shown foresight in this first season. They rewarded or followed up on the promised elements of plots in many ways. They even called back to the first visit that Dexter has to Prator's vault, when Prator said they only get one shot at entering the right code, and if that code is incorrect, there'll be an alarm that goes off. That particular element paid off in the finale. Now, when it comes to individual characters, I want to go character by character and just explore what happened to them, rather than going scene by scene in the actual finale. Leon Prator. Leon Prator is the character about whom I had very decisive aspirations, in terms of I did not want him to be killed off this season, because I believe that the idea that he proposed was very compelling, which is also acknowledged by Dexter in their final scene together. Leon Prator has contacts of killers all over the world, probably, and he propositions Dexter and says that I can just get those people together, they can have a weekend, and then you do what you do, meaning you become their liaison to meet their maker, which was very interesting to me because I would be happy to watch that show as well. Maybe in an alternate universe that show can exist. We all knew that that was probably not going to happen, though. Dexter ultimately refused that offer by letting Batista free, and ultimately, spoilers ahead for people who've not watched episode 9, Batista does not team up with Dexter, to the chagrin of some people, but then understandably goes against Dexter, tries to end Dexter, and unfortunately gets taken out by Prator, who shoots Batista multiple times in the back. Prator is unhappy about developments, obviously. He traps Dexter in that vault, as we know, by the end of episode 9. He tries to stop Harrison, who is Dexter's agent in the gala, trying to free Dexter. Ultimately, Harrison succeeds at doing this by some difficult-to-believe method of finding the exact 8-digit code, which is also making true this trope of the character in peril will somehow always achieve that elusive code some way or the other. It's slightly annoying because it requires the viewer to suspend their disbelief even further than normal, and it just keeps on happening. This particular trope for me seems to be a little annoying, unless it was built up what exactly that would be. And some people can argue here that yes, the code was built up, the particular combination of numbers which would open the vault door, that was kind of built up when Prator shared his backstory with Dexter at that getaway, at that excursion that they had where Dexter took out Gemini, the other Gemini, the second Gemini. For which I can be happy about this as well somehow. It just irked me when this was again happening. My solution to these problems is typically do not promise it if you do not do it in a very believable or well built up manner. And still, it happens. Harrison is able to free Dexter. Leon Prator is downstairs. He knows Harrison is there, so he follows Harrison. Dexter is able to escape the vault by wiping his fingerprints, and he takes some of the files that he finds on various serial slayers, as Leon Prator calls them, which is when he learns that Prator has captured Harrison and is holding Harrison on gunpoint. Harrison uses quote-unquote protection, which Dexter provided him last season, which is M99, and he ultimately gets the jump on Prator, who ultimately tries to off Dexter, but then gets interrupted when Harrison, taking advantage of the moment, injects Prator with that injection, with that drug. Prator finds himself at Dexter's mercy, trapped in plastic. Where did Dexter get that plastic? I don't know. And that is an open question that I wanted to be clued in on, but I don't know. I don't have any clue. It's a nitpick, of course. It's just something that was so clearly unlikely to be found in the environment that Dexter was exposed to at Prator's mansion that I believed it required a mention. Anyhow, Prator is wrapped in plastic on the same table where Dexter ended the life of his brother, the ice truck killer. Prator begs for his life. Prator tries to persuade Dexter not to kill him, which is, a little laughable, and yet, of course, it's worth a shot. If you envision his situation as someone who is at the mercy of one of the most prolific serial slayers of his time, you would try everything. It's just a little unlikely that he would accept the premise that Leon's cries are legitimate and promises are meant, when just moments before, or minutes before that, maybe lots of minutes before that, tried to end Dexter, and then promised to end Harrison as well. So this whole begging and whiny nature comes across as a bit, still very true to character, just a bit unnecessary or unlikely to succeed, and yet worth a shot, as I mentioned. Ultimately, Dexter reveals, you can say, a progression of the code, where he says that it's a dual layer code of sorts, where he is doing both things. He is doing it for the thrill of taking people out, but to satisfy his urges of taking people out, serial slayer and whatnot, and yet honoring the code still continues his familial theme of doling out justice in his own way, in the way that is typical to his family, the Morgan family. Harrison has it. Deborah is, of course, was in law enforcement before she was removed from the show. Dexter's father, Harry, was obviously a cop as well, and Dexter worked in law enforcement for his entire adult life, pretty much, before his quote-unquote demise at the end of New Blood as well. He was always affiliated. So the theme of justice and also satisfying his dubious urges or dangerous urges is a combination which he acknowledges as some sort of an evolution or development of the code. Prator dies, and I know I started this as a reflection of Prator, and yet it became more of a summary of the scene and that particular arc, which was the main arc of the entire episode anyhow. I will go deeper into the other threads now. After finishing off on Prator, I really wished that Prator would be hanging around, because he could supply Dexter with some of the targets, and that role will now be provided by the files that Dexter took from Prator's vault. I'm just not sure how Dexter can now have the resources to go after so many people, because he's not in possession of any very highly rewarding job, and Prator's money is not in his grasp. The only thing he did get from Prator was what he usually got from Miami Metro in terms of targets that he would go after. So he's got some of those in the form of those files that he took. So I'll be curious to see where that goes. I believe Prator should have hung around, and yet after his demise, I am confident that it was great, because if this is the best that Dexter Resurrection gets, it honored Prator's character very well. On to the other characters. Other characters who appeared, I have to acknowledge Biney. I did not even remember he was called Biney. That is on me. That's my bad. Brian Moser, the ice truck killer, made an appearance as Dexter's ghost, the devil on his shoulder, and he makes the argument that the only reason Dexter finds himself in this predicament in the vault is because he was following the angel on his shoulder, Harry's code, which is very swiftly shut down by Dexter, who says he's glad he took out Brian when he got the chance. He's again aligning himself to the light more often than not, which is in the show thematically represented by Harry, by Deborah, and by Harrison as well, for the most part. Next up, of course, Harry was still around, and Harry is quickly becoming just this family legacy character. I suppose he always was. I used to associate Harry Morgan more with Dexter's moral compass, of course, directly aligned with the code, and yet I see him more as just his grandfather role, which is manifested in Dexter's mind now, which is very stereotypical, very cliched, and yet it works in this season. I hope that that is not the only thing that works as a continuous plot thread in Harry's case, because I would not be as engaged if the only way people get to Dexter would be by targeting Harrison, which is something that Uma Thurman's character Charley already mentioned in the last episode, that Prator seizes the weakness of the people that he associates with. For Charley, it was Charley's mother. For Dexter, it is clearly Dexter's son. And then Dexter has to work in a way that protects Harrison, puts Harrison out of danger, which is fine once in a while, but if it's constant, it waters down the concept of Dexter being actually resurrected, because he's then just Dexter the father, which is an interesting plot point. It's just something that should not be the only focus of the show, which is focused on the character Dexter, not the father Dexter. So that is about Brian and Harry. I go to Angel Batista. Of course, I have not reviewed the other episodes in any way, so I will give a quick recap of Batista. And this is where my largest gripes lie in terms of this season. I always wanted Batista to be the ultimate person going after Dexter, because he had the legacy, the franchise character role, again representing the light in the show, the emotional center. With a week's distance from my first viewing of Dexter Resurrection episode 9, where, spoilers ahead for people who don't know, Angel dies. Well, actually, I've discussed Angel dying, so it's a bit too late for the spoiler warning. But Angel dying was horrible for me. I thought he's lost all his brain cells. You write him to lose all his brain cells, and then he's just going after Dexter for killing Dokes and Maria, but then he's not done the deed. He did not off Maria or Dokes, which is something Dexter tells Batista. Batista was no longer really looking for justice, but rather personal revenge. I never knew Batista, to be too buddy-buddy with Dokes. So I suppose Maria's affiliation with Dokes served as the thread that tied Batista to Dokes. I believe it was more just Maria. And yet, it was a little difficult to believe, which is still kind of made believable because Batista is an emotional man. It always has been, La Pasión. It's still stuck out as a sore thumb to me, as almost unbelievable. Because how would he skip thinking, reassessing, reframing, and redesigning his approach when there are so many moments during his pursuit of Dexter and his pursuit of justice, of bringing Dexter to justice, when he cannot get it right the first time, he gets another opportunity. He sees how the people are looking at him. I'm talking about the scene where he finds that kill room that Dexter designed, and yet it was not a scenario where Dexter was going to go through with it because the tenant did not match the code. And yet Batista found that place. He called Wallace and Wallace's cop partner, and they were looking at him with disbelieving eyes, thinking that Batista's lost his marbles. So that was a great moment for Batista to take a step back and explore ways that he actually could get the job done. He had the resources. He could tell Quinn, he could tell Masuka, and then build a plan amongst themselves, also maybe involving off the record or off the books resources of Miami Metro in some way, with databases and maybe even cops who are contacts of Miami officers, something like that. There were other ways of approaching this. They could even build on ties between the Miami Metro and New York Police Department, maybe even the Sheriff's Department. They could have gotten something done, and yet Batista goes on this lone wolf tirade of trying to find Dexter red-handed. AirPods, okay, clever AirPods. You follow him to a place which could be a kill room. Okay, call Quinn, call people you trust. Why would you rely on Wallace when you don't have any concrete evidence? And Batista just never reassesses, and then unfortunately in the very next episode he finds Prator with Dexter. And he takes a picture and believes Prator to be this philanthropist, and he thinks he will out Dexter to Prator. So he approaches him. He goes through a bunch of bodyguards at Prator's residence, forces a meeting with Prator, and divulges Dexter's true identity, in hopes that this will somehow serve his purpose of getting Dexter to justice. The entire thing just is a little bit outside the scope. I don't think his death was necessary. Batista's end was not necessary this season. It could have continued to be built up, and yet I know this is not really an unpopular opinion. I know people would support that in many ways, and I also know that the idea that Batista should have heeded the warning from Dexter in one of the preceding episodes. Let's stay away. If I am who you think I am, this is not going to end well for you. That warning. And that was a good warning. This is where Dexter is, in my mind, absolved of direct fault for Batista's death, because no one told Batista to pursue it. Or if you are going to pursue it, if you are going to continue being the moral center and the force of what's right, okay, do it smartly. Was Batista in it for the right reasons? Did he really do it for justice, or was it plain old revenge because La Guelta? La Guelta is how he pronounced LaGuerta's name. I always found it to be fascinating. I just thought he was a disgruntled ex-lover, who went after the person he believed caused the end of La Guerta, which is justified. Just you lose any and all reason in the pursuit of that while being the best friend of this person, Dexter, then mourning the death of this person for 10 years until you find out he's actually alive and could be the Bay Harbor butcher. That is the worst part of this season for me. And still, if you say Batista was just so passionate, la pasión, who refused la pensión, to stay in New York and explore this, I'd say it's possible. It's just incredibly improbable. So yes, Batista's end comes for me in an underwhelming fashion, primarily because he does not get his own season. If this season was just Batista, good, great. Then if he dies in the end for some other reason, all right. He served one good purpose, which is that Dexter did not make the ultimate choice of killing him, because the prelude to the moment Dexter freed Batista, the dialogue in Dexter's mind was, the first rule is don't get caught, so this is justifiable. And yet Dexter does not do that because he listens to the light. Good, very good. Unfortunately, Batista's death comes at the hands of a character in the A plot, while Batista is the B plot, which is just almost unbearable for me. So that caps off Batista's arc. Now we are left with maybe Quinn coming into the fold. How will it be different for him? I'll wait to see, because he's been part of the cast since season 3, so he's a legacy character too. He's just more dubious and more morally complex than Batista. So that might be interesting too. I cannot write off Quinn as less compelling. It might be less glorified because Batista, the moral center, the emotional heart of the show, going up against Dexter, the questionable protagonist of this entire franchise. Yeah, but very intriguing, of course. Let's go on to the next character. The next character, Charley Brown, Prator's right-hand lady. Under his thumb, of course, because he's paying for her mother's treatment, so he gets her to do all kinds of dastardly deeds in his for him at his behest. Where do I begin? The first thing is Uma Thurman has done a great job portraying this, and I, of course, have to shout out the performance of Peter Dinklage, who is very compelling as Prator as well. There is a bit of a tragedy to Prator's character, which is conveyed in the performance, while also highlighting a very believable arc where Prator finds his ability to be a killer as well, because he's always been a second-hand learner of the event ever since his parents met their end at the hands of a serial slayer, and that carried forward to a complete character arc. So Peter Dinklage, amazingly done. The little nuances in his delivery when he's begging for his life, when he's begging off away from Dexter, when Dexter has Prator at his table, those little eye expressions, the quivering lip, wonderful touches, nuances, which I'm not sure we got as much when he was portraying Tyrion Lannister. For me, this is an even better performance, not as a character, because Prator is, a season-long villain, and Tyrion was a main character over the course of many, many seasons, and yet for me, it's more memorable as a single arc for a character. Now, sorry for the aside, I just needed to pay homage to the performance before going back to Charley. So Charley is tormented, of course, and morally complex again, because we don't know her backstory until we see her mother in some of the B-plot or C-plot scenes. And she is shown to be very capable. She has served her country. She's very adept at handling weapons. She has no qualms about ending people's lives, committing kills, let's say. And she is under a limited time contract, the determiner being her mother's death. If her mother passes away, Charley's a loose cannon. I cannot really say, as a context-less statement, I cannot say that I'm waiting for Charley's mother to be removed from the equation to see what she would be capable of or what choices she would make, and yet that is where I find myself in the story. I believe there's a lot of storyline narrative potential when that hanging obligation is taken away. We are seeing a suppressed version of the character. We don't really know who she is, more than she's willing to make very questionable choices in the name of family safety, which is fine, and she's very capable with weapons, and her performance is understated, subtle, appreciable, so good. I always got the feeling she was underutilized until maybe the last 2 episodes, ever since she has that scene with Harrison and in the hotel, and then again in the finale with the Prator Dexter, and then with Harrison, and then the phone conversation with Dexter again. So we get to see some layers, of course, and I would be rather underwhelmed if she did not make a return, because of course there's that promise that she made to Dexter, that Dexter will promise to meet his end in the vault, and she would let Harrison walk away because Dexter allowed her mother to go unharmed. So this was, in her mind, a fair exchange, and she said Dexter had to accept this fate, and if he would not do that, she vowed to come back and finish the life, or bring an end to the life of Harrison at a moment unbeknownst to any of them. It could be a month, it could be a day, it could be 10 years, it could be anything. So that ticking time bomb, which also gives me hope that Charley and her existence would be acknowledged in the seasons to come. Now, there was one other thing that I will use to segue into the next character. Is Gigi Charley's daughter? I thought they would hint something to that effect, but there was nothing on that. Anyhow, let's move to, actually, Gigi. Okay. Gigi, why was she brought to provide what, exactly? I'm not entirely sold on the entire relationship yet. It just has laid the groundwork for what Harrison could be doing, and there's a pun there. Who? Anyhow, it's just a little bit of a left turn based on how Harrison's romantic storyline was developing. First with that, I want to say Elsa, right? That lady who's got a child, and Harrison is babysitting for her, and she works at the same hotel, and she allows Harrison to crash at the unoccupied hotel rooms. So I think that was building somewhere. He wanted to take things further with her when he initiated a kiss and she backed away. It seemed like that was his primary interest, and Gigi was his distraction for the physical element, or just getting something, while Elsa was not accepting his advances. That's really it. We don't really know anything about Gigi. Okay, she wants a career in criminology, so okay, I take that back. We don't not know anything, we know very little. Okay, she's fascinated with criminology. She wanted to be part of law enforcement, but her nerve damage in her arm is preventing her from doing that. And she got to know Dexter. She got to know that Dexter was a blood spatter analyst, and her possibilities in law enforcement are not nil. They're limited, and we'll see how her character progresses, if at all, from that point. Otherwise, if I put it very bluntly, the portrayal of the character is pretty much that she is Harrison's squeeze, right? I think that sums it all up. And she's got a mouth on her. Kind of. She is a little defiant. She is making claims that are definitely not true. She is playing around, joking around, and part of Harrison getting to know her is identifying when that is compared to when she's being sincere. Just casual, fun character. Okay, now let's go to another potentially very nice character, who was underexplored in the finale, that being Blessing and his family. I think we can rope that into one particular category. The character of Blessing is actually layered, so that is a welcome breather from some of the simple characters that we've got, especially in the serial Slayer group, which I have not yet gotten to. They're all connected in some way or the other. Of course, the connecting plot is Dexter. The connecting element is Dexter. Blessing is a former child soldier who is now an immigrant in the USA, living in New York, working as a cab share driver. He's the one who finds Dexter in New York and gives Dexter a place to live. It was a little bit difficult to believe how quickly he offered Dexter a place to stay after the context in which they met, which was that there was a serial slayer in New York who was going into cabs and killing the drivers as a revenge for mistreatment to his own father, the serial slayer's father, from other cab drivers, something like that, something vague. So that part was a little difficult to believe. Then we get to know his family a little bit. It was all a B plot or C plot, mostly C plot, because there's no great impact that Blessing has on the A plot of the show. Dexter just finds a place to live. That's fine. And apart from that, he does not get involved much. I thought that promise that was implied when Blessing told Dexter about his child soldier past, and when Dexter told his daughter about that in an attempt to actually soothe Blessing's daughter, while Blessing's daughter was practicing chiropractic on Dexter, I thought that was going to get Blessing involved in the A-plot in some way, some indirect way. The closest he got to the actual main meat on the bone of this entire first season was when Batista went looking for Dexter's home in New York, and he found Blessing instead, and then Batista endeared himself to Blessing. Batista saw a lot of his own attitude toward Dexter in how Blessing saw Dexter, seeing that Dexter was very affable and amiable with people around him, and other people trusted Dexter very easily, which added layers to Batista's pursuit of Dexter. Very sweet. And yet, Blessing's entire involvement, beyond providing Dexter a place to stay, is a promise for future seasons, rather than something great that happened in this particular season, as far as I'm concerned. Dexter did not have any significant character developments in connection to Blessing, aside from mentioning one time that people like Blessing, he needed those people in his life. Which is adding to an overall overarching element of Dexter that I will refer to at the end of this audio/video. Now, Blessing's family takes Dexter in, provides him with affection and human civility, and just welcome. They give him a welcome in a new city. So that has been a humane part of the season, which I always like. So they didn't hurt. It's just that almost dragging can be attributed to some of the scenes. Almost dragging. Especially with Blessing's daughter's fiance or boyfriend. I'm not sure what the nature of the relationship is. Especially that part. Dexter had a good relationship with Blessing's mother as well, who explained to him why she did not have the will to carry on or will to get treated when she was suffering from an ailment. So those scenes were nice. Right, moving on to the next character. The next bunch of characters would be the members of that kill club. The most intriguing possibility was with the Gemini killers, especially because of the actor who portrayed them, and the red herring that they pulled. The Gemini killer being Gemini killers was a very nice rug pull, which surprised a bunch of people, including, well, most of the fandom, and almost me. I was a little bit clued in when Gemini said he is placing that bookmark for himself. And Gemini, because twins, so that clued me in a little bit. So I was not surprised when Gemini actually showed up. Unfortunately, other than that, let's have a look. Gemini killer. First, I'll focus on the Gemini killer. The arrogance and overconfidence that Gemini Killer 1 showed Dexter was very predictable. And of course, it's believable because some of the people who are in that line of work, let's say, I don't want to keep hammering on the same word, never know what the algorithm dislikes. The reliance of that trope was believable in this particular instance. And then cue the next scene with Gemini Killer 2 at Prator's excursion, when he took them to some garden-filled place. I'm not sure exactly what that place was. Anyway, Dexter finds the second Gemini killer and discloses to him, which was a very ballsy move, and I really enjoyed the build-up to that, other than just how easy it was to provoke Gemini Killer 2. Because, my mind sometimes works in the other direction. What if the Gemini killer just clued other people in that, hey, Dexter just told me that he killed someone very important to me, and maybe he could not have said that. Dexter maybe calculated that Gemini would not want to disclose to other people that he was one of two, for which reason Dexter maybe took the calculated risk of actually disclosing that he offed the first Gemini killer to the other Gemini killer. Maybe that's why. Either way, it just, for me, it seems to be very convenient that Gemini Killer 2 started this, duel where ultimately Dexter prevailed. And then that served as a very convenient way for Dexter to pin a lot of things on Gemini. Now, let's have a look at the others. Neil Patrick Harris, in the form of Lowell, the tattoo collector or tattoo killer. I'm not sure what his moniker was. Very underwhelming. Very brief, his stay on screen. I don't think he even differentiated himself in many ways. I'm not even sure. Maybe I was going through those episodes a little faster than I was the later episodes. I don't recall anything major other than the death scene of Neil Patrick Harris's character Lowell being on Dexter's table, and Dexter just essentially cluing us in on where he was mentally, on where Dexter was mentally, while beginning to feed his urges once again. After Red, of course. So Dexter discloses that he is the Bay Harbor Butcher to Lowell and then proceeds to end Lowell's life. Okay, so ticked off. Check mark. Gone. Then we move on to Mia, I think, right? Is there someone else? Lowell, Mia, Al, who gets away, the Gemini killers. Yeah, that's pretty much it. No one else that we saw, at least not on screen. So Mia, again, I thought it could be explored further. It was a little promising in the sense that there could be someone on Dexter's side, and I was looking for that particular character, the support to Dexter's evil ways in some way, in some form, because Harrison is not that, and even though he, of course, is family, and this season has been much more tolerable in terms of how good or how supportive Harrison is toward his father, while knowing his father's secret. So I was looking for that one character who would, among this culture of serial slayers, would be able to relate to Dexter the most, and the promise for that was made by the show in the form of Mia. So when the romantic interest was hinted upon between the two, I thought, okay, no, most likely not, because they're not going to give a long-term romantic interest to Dexter as of yet. Maybe they will pull some similar storyline in the next season, but this is a resurrection, right? So in Resurrection, maybe a one-night stand or something like that, a one-and-done sort of thing, could be explored, but a proper relationship with someone who understands him on a deeper level and also somehow follows a code, which would make them exempt from Dexter's kill list vis-a-vis Prator's serial slayers group, which is just a little unbelievable. Which ultimately, unfortunately, turned out to be correct, because a wonderful actress, Kristen Ritter, was given good screen time, and yet that turn where she says she actually enjoys offing people was a little, how do we say, off-putting? Yeah, it just killed that enthusiasm that, okay, finally we get to see a team-up of sorts with Dexter opposite someone who understands him. Other than that, nothing very memorable. She exploited some idiot in a bar who fell for her, and ultimately she was about to do her ritual, her very, very graphic and very painful ritual on him, just for the sake of killing, which Dexter interrupted and saved his life. Wonderful. And he got Mia arrested. This was when Dexter was still trying to avoid attention in terms of who is this person. Red entered the group, and a bunch of the members of the group are getting killed or becoming missing. So what's going on? So Dexter was careful about that insofar as he got Mia arrested, did not do the deed himself. Good. Which opened the door for us exploring, will Mia survive? Will she survive this particular plot thread? And there was reason to believe that she would when she promised Charley that she would not disclose any details, she will keep her mouth shut. And Charley says very ominously that they will try to make her Mia stay, in the prison as short and comfortable as possible, which is open to interpretation as to what she meant. She was killed off, ultimately. which was, again, okay, there goes Kristen Ritter from the show. I suppose it's not so easy to get that level, that stature of actors, such as Peter Dinklage, Uma Thurman, Kristen Ritter, Neil Patrick Harris, to long-term storylines. So I suppose it was inevitable that all of them would be written off. But it's still, there was a promise there, or there was a hope. Not a promise in this case. The show did not promise anything. It's just there was a hope that something of that nature would happen, which was not the case. Anyhow, moving on to, well, Gemini 1 and 2. There was a clever scene with Gemini number 1 where Dexter preempted that Gemini 1 would want to switch glasses when Dexter offered a drink to him. So Dexter preempted that and, in fact, had the poison-ridden glass with him, which then Gemini opted to take, which was a nice little clever tactic, which paid off, which is nice. Then they had the fake out of Will Blessing discover Gemini 1's body after Dexter did the deed in the tub behind the curtains, especially when one of the rings from the curtain was off, was not in place. So that was a little, what will happen, little thread to explore. So, good scene, all in all. Gemini 1, that led to the reveal that there is a second Gemini. Nicely done. Then Gemini 2 gets killed off, which was not to my liking. That was probably the only downside to this entire thing, other than it conveniently tied a bow on top of the suspicions that people would have had that, okay, Red, aka Dexter, entered the fray, and that led to all these characters, or led to all these serial slayers in Prator's group dropping like flies. And the entire reasoning from Dexter was that Gemini had a big ego, and he was aggrandizing himself. And in service of that, he was removing these people from the group, which Prator was very quick to believe. In the middle of all of this, you've got Dexter showing his, doing his show and tell presentation where he talks about the urge, the need, and his mask, which he is happy to drop when he is in the process of offing someone, which endeared Prator to him. Prator opened up about his past, which further led to Dexter and Prator becoming closer, which made Prator less inclined to believe Charley's suspicions about Red, aka Dexter. That's about the serial slayers group. Moving on to the next character. Logically, the next one should be Harrison. He was much more tolerable in Resurrection than he was in New Blood, and yet, you can see why a person in his position would be very intolerable in New Blood, in similar circumstances. This season, given that his father is alive, I suppose he stopped beating himself up when he realized that his father was alive, after probably feeling horrible about being a kin slayer. Lots of slaying in this show, huh? Of course, that goes in the name, goes in the theme. Harrison is trying to build a bond with Dexter, and he is essentially looking to repair hurt that he's experienced all throughout his life, including the off-screen demise of Hannah McKay, who is his spiritual mother, having taken Harrison to Argentina when Dexter was believed to be dead. Harrison makes a return in New Blood and kind of is believed to have removed Dexter from the drawing board, which does not stick, of course, because it's Dexter and he makes a successful resurrection. Harrison, in the meantime, is a man of conscience, which is something that is driven home multiple times this season, that the theme of justice, doing the right thing, morality, a moral compass, Harrison is more a product of that than the Brian Moser category of this gene pool. Good, wonderful. And Harrison stopped beating himself up for having removed Dexter when Dexter shows up in his life again. Of course, this is after Dexter has tracked Harrison to New York and found out that Harrison, in his white knighting, has actually already committed another kill, that of a horrible person who was notorious for drugging certain women and then doing horrible things thereafter. So Harrison found himself in this situation, and he could have turned the other way, but he returned to that hotel room of that person with whom he, unbeknownst to him, insofar as that person's indiscretions, had a bond with. So he goes into that hotel room where he knows this bad person, horrible person, is about to do something horrible, and proceeds to save that girl, while also ending the life of the horrible person. So Harrison has actually followed some kind of a code when he does that, and following in the footsteps of his father, he knows how to go about removing suspicion from him and doing his best to clean the crime scene, which he does, and he escapes the very informed eye of a Detective Wallace, about whom I will speak in a bit. Harrison continues to be a morally clean character, which is rare on this show, so it's good. Of course, Harrison's morality can be brought into question again when you take into consideration his acceptance of Dexter's nature. And yet that is an evolution of their relationship, so that is, I suppose, very understandable, if not forgivable. Harrison protects his father at every turn. Harrison also has the most humane moments. He rewards Dexter for being open with him, exemplified perfectly when Dexter admits, and this is one of the rare cases where the word admit is used correctly, because making a statement is not admitting anything, yet Dexter admits that Harrison's biological mother, Rita, died because of Dexter's mistakes, which is something Harrison probably already knew. It's just that he heard it from the man himself, which indicated to him that Dexter is willing to take the next step in accountability of some sort, which deepened their bond, and that thereafter the relationship between the two of them has been wholesome, which is one of the main reasons why Harrison became very tolerable this season, because that also it satisfied that position in the show where you needed someone in Dexter's corner, which was usually not there in the first half, and it was there in the second. Of course, I hope they don't overplay their hand where this becomes a easy weakness to exploit, familial weakness, that, okay, we'll kidnap the character's family and get the character to do things that he would normally not do, which again conflicts with Dexter's individuality, where he believes that all these burdens are not necessary. At least Brian Moser, in his mind, says, let go of these affiliations, it will free you up to be a better serial slayer. Harrison has also shown a lot of skill in lying, very impressively. Also been very manipulative where he needs to be, maneuvering difficult scenarios where other characters, or lesser characters in terms of intelligence, would have perished. So Harrison has learned a lot from not just his father, but also his life in Argentina, which has been alluded to. And Harrison's moral code. I keep using the word code, while code means something completely different in this universe. You can say moral compass. Mindset exemplifies a direct correlation to Deborah. And I'm just glad. Anything connected to Deborah Morgan that is harkened back to or called back to, I enjoy. My God, I miss Deborah Morgan on this show so much, especially in light of the horrible way that she was written off. Underwhelming as ever. Anyway, that, if I start rambling on about that this will be 5 hours. Anyhow, let's continue with Harrison. The most impressive scene for Harrison that I have watched in this season was when he encountered Charley. Not to mention the clever way that they shot that. It was Harrison, after the fact, calling Dexter and reporting to him what had happened between Charley and he, after Prator promised Dexter that Prator would not go after Harrison, when Red promised to disclose more of his background to Prator in exchange for Prator not pursuing Harrison or harming Harrison. So that scene between Charley and Harrison was my favorite insofar as Harrison is concerned. Beautifully acted. The hesitation in Harrison's mind, while also knowing that Charley is a trained professional when it comes to interrogation, probably. The ominous placement of the gun, indicating the stakes involved as well. So Harrison knew he could not outright lie, so he gives half truths and some details which can be called valid, which would be enough to increase the chances, increase the likelihood of Harrison walking out of the room alive. And then Dexter, of course, finds out from Harrison that Charley lifted Harrison's prints from that hotel room, which then opens the door for the events thereafter. Harrison has been groomed in a positive way. I don't mean to associate this with the negative connotation by Dexter, and that is largely connected to Dexter's cunning, intelligence, presence of mind, crisis management, and ruthlessness. So Harrison's progression in the series from this point on will be one of the most important things, while also trying to avoid that familial aspect that I alluded to earlier. Now we get to the detectives. One of my favorites in terms of characters from this show, Detective Claudette Wallace. She's one of the actresses who manages to make monotone work. It's rare. Of course, David Dastmalchian, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, he can achieve that. He's a very, very impressive actor, especially character actor. And in some way, Claudette Wallace's actress, her name escapes me right now, she achieves that too. She is so engaging from the first moment on. The introduction with her quirks and her particular idiosyncrasies and her reputation, it's immediately giving the sense of this is going to be a formidable opponent if this character ever faces off against the series protagonist. And that formidability is only built on from the moment she investigates the death of the person who was removed, I will keep using these euphemisms, by Harrison. Her smarts, her intuition, and her lack of worry as to what other people are thinking, and then her strange ways of blocking out other senses. For example, when she listens to Staying Alive on and on as a way to connect her to her peaceful space or locking in, getting zoned in on a particular aspect. Those things endear her to a large part of the audience as well. She is probably going to be a fan favorite character moving forward. She has a white whale in the form of the New York Ripper, which is a character I might or might not allude to. I do intend on making this video maybe an hour and 15 minutes long, so we'll go according to that. Let's see. Wallace. Mia Wallace, Claudette Wallace. Marcellus Wallace? Yeah. So there are some references there littered everywhere on purpose, so it's nice to pick up on those as well once in a while. Anyway, sorry to digress. Claudette Wallace dances in the finale of the show when Staying Alive starts playing at the gala, which is a good thing because if not for that, she would have left the gala, and Leon Prator and the body of Angel Batista would not be discovered by her, and we needed her to be there to discover the file which is attributed to the New York Ripper, her white whale, the one case that she never could solve. I'm not sure if they actually disclosed why exactly that is her white whale. Maybe there was a personal connection, sisters, brothers, family, I'm not sure. I don't recall that at this moment. The actress is very subtle in her portrayal. The accent also is very good. She, in some cases, seems to be a very formidable opponent, and yet she has not been painted as invincible. Best seen in one of my favorite scenes of the season when Dexter, as part of Harrison's desire to attend a college, meets Detective Wallace in a presentation where this woman is describing and profiling and presenting the New York Ripper and what he did and why it remains an important priority for her. Dexter then, recalling the weapon that he saw at Prator's vault, suggests to Wallace, in a very tactical move, that she might not be headed in the right direction insofar as her idea of what the weapon is or was. But he does that in a very, very clever way. And this scene is very interesting to me because both characters might be doing something silly. Dexter, in that moment, knows he's facing off against a law enforcement officer who, based on insinuations and suggestions and repeated assertions from Angel Batista, has reason to suspect Dexter Morgan to be the Bay Harbor butcher. Dexter knows about this, and yet Dexter continues to be a little bit reckless. He then questions Wallace's idea of the weapon and says, the weapons and the blood spatter are more consistent with a longer weapon, maybe with a hook at the end, and he demonstrates the path that the weapon would take if his description was taken to be correct. So Dexter might not be being his most careful self, maybe a little bit too comfortable. On the other hand, you have got Detective Wallace, who is usually completely in control of any conversation. She is looking for cues in the people she's talking to. She's very sensitive to little deviations in tone, their breath, and how they are maintaining their posture, all those little things that lots of law enforcement officers are trained in. And yet, she has been rendered a little bit vulnerable because before questioning her idea of the weapon of the New York Ripper, Dexter again lays the groundwork for why she should not take Batista's insinuations and accusations as accurate. Then he plays the mental mind game of, if he is right about the character description of Batista, he must be right about the weapon, and vice versa. So he builds credibility in the eyes of a very formidable opponent. And of course, Claudette will verify this, test this. I am very intrigued to find out how she will approach the topic of Dexter Morgan after she finds out, after the death of Angel Batista, how she places Batista in that vault and who did the deed and why. Of course, the direct link is Prator. But will she go beyond what the surface indicates? Because there's a lot of meat on the bone insofar as investigations. Batista's phone was used to make calls to Harrison, who is yet again somehow connected to another killing, another death of a prominent figure. Well, the first one was not a prominent figure, but you know what I mean. So those are very important moments to explore and threads to explore in the coming seasons. Claudette Wallace might be taking over as the most beloved character with a law enforcement background until Quinn enters the fold. Detective Wallace's partner, I don't recall his name. There was a theory that maybe he was an agent of Prator, having been paid off by Prator to keep tabs on the investigation of various people who might be victims of various slayers that Prator liaises with. That never went anywhere. That was never really on the cards. I do wonder what his role would be, whether it will be expanded in the coming seasons. Underutilized, but probably, given the limited amount of screen time everyone had, he was utilized very effectively. I suppose a little bit more input in Mia's death and him doing the legwork in that could have satiated my slight desire to see a little bit more of his capabilities as a detective. We've gotten suspiciously little of that from Batista and also this Wallace's second in command or partner. Yeah, I think it's a partner. So the only good detective in this whole season has been, well, Dexter himself and Detective Wallace. Probably the closing section of characters can be rounded off by speaking about Quinn and Masuka. Quinn would be naturally added to the second season as a major player because he knows his captain, his former captain, Angel Batista, somehow found himself in New York. So he will definitely go to New York too. I believe Dexter by that point would maybe not be in New York. Or maybe he's feeling too callous and too reckless or overconfident or very, very sure of himself, so he would stay. All that remains to be seen. Quinn will very automatically, very naturally fit into the mold of what is required as an opponent, as an opposing force to Dexter. It remains to be seen. However, I do not look forward to seeing all the legacy characters of Miami Metro being knocked off one by one, whether directly at the hands of Dexter or indirectly as a result of his actions. That is a theme that just becomes a little bit impossible to believe, rationally speaking, because just look at the toll. We've got La Guerta, Batista, Deborah, Dexter himself, all of that. Who's left? Masuka and Quinn. And maybe Soderquist, but he was never a major player, so we don't know. And we also don't know what the status of Tom is, the chief, the police chief in Miami Metro, former. Maybe he's retired by now. The one who was also friends with Harry Morgan. Masuka's role, I believe, unless Dexter goes back to Miami, which is a possibility, it's just that I think it would be a little too soon. It's also possible they stay in New York. I would prefer that they stay in New York, even though it would contradict Dexter's usual presence of mind of moving from one place to another. So we'll see what future seasons bring. The characters I'm looking forward to seeing in the coming seasons, the first one would be one of the likely suspects to be the New York Ripper, which was Jonah Mitchell. I'm not sure how the timelines align in this case, and yet it could be a possibility. There was a scene in the past where he was shown to be adept at using a weapon similar to that was used by the New York Ripper. So that's a direct connection. I doubt that the writers, having shown skill and foresight and lots of self-awareness, would have given the Ripper a weapon so similar to something that has already been used. And also there is imagery which connects it to a character previously shown. And not just shown, he's the son of probably one of the top 3 most memorable antagonists for a lot of people. Number 1, the Trinity Killer, who was incorrectly coined because he killed in 4s, not 3s, which was part of the allure of season 4, but I digress. Jonah Mitchell, I'd like to get some status report on where he's been, because the Dexter universe is actually very vast. I used to think it isn't, and yet when I go through the characters, and the fact that this video has already been more than an hour suggests to me that I might have been a little bit too quick to believe it was not as deep as it should be. So, Jonah Mitchell, absolutely would love to see a sighting, or love to get a report on what has been happening in his life after he was spared by Dexter. Then, let's see. Yeah, Lumen from season 5. Most amazing alliance in the underrated 5th season came in the form of Lumen, who knows what Dexter is, and her darkness is satiated after she takes revenge upon those who had wronged her, and she keeps a secret and moves on with her life. One of the few satisfactory exits from the show, as I wanted Prator's to be in the beginning, but that was not to be. Lumen would be very refreshing as an addition to season 2 or 3 without needing to be one of the obligatory kills. That would be horrible, because it's just getting to be a recurring theme where a franchise character comes in and is just finished off, written off, killed off. So if only for that, then no. If to become a part of the narrative in a significant way to inform Dexter's trajectory and also to pose either challenges or a meaningful alliance, then yes. Otherwise, no. I would also like to look into Hannah McKay's status, because she's supposed to be no longer alive in the universe, because Harrison says he attended her funeral, but not a lot of information was given as to what led to that, or the scenario or the context behind her demise. So more information on that front would be deeply appreciated, and we know she's very capable, or she used to be very capable of faking something like that and returning from the dead, or adapting, or moving on from things, or making sure that there was a foundation and platform for Harrison to continue to thrive in his life, even though she was either really or thought to be no longer alive. So that remains to be seen. Hannah McKay, definitely part of that list. Then we've got the location and the happenings and the life and times of Aster and Cody, technically Dexter's stepchildren, who never get anything more than maybe a cursory mention ever since the original series finale. Because what happened to them? They are his stepchildren. Whenever he thinks of family, the only person they refer to, is Harrison. And of course, Harry Morgan, Deborah Morgan, okay, and Brian Moser. But never Aster and Cody. What happened to Aster and Cody? Cody really liked Dexter. So that's another really, really pertinent, with a lot of potential plot thread that could be utilized in a significant way. And that is definitely not one that is in the category of can be killed off. So bring them in. So that's another person. Those are two people that I would like to see where they are, what's happening with them. Can they be involved in some of the storylines moving ahead? Are there more characters that I would like to see? Let's go through the list a little bit. Deborah Morgan, actually, and this might be something that is not a very popular observation. I've always believed that Deborah Morgan's death was the worst. And that is even worse than what I think to be Angel Batista's death, which was also heavily underwhelming for me. Deborah Morgan was written off because of a gunshot wound. She was said to be feeling better, and then something happened. Magically, she was dead. I have had this, it's more based on hope, because I really respected Jennifer Carpenter's portrayal. I don't think there are even a handful of actresses who could do what she did for the character. That's one. So it might be my hope more than any plausible theory. And yet, I will share it with you. The theory is that Quinn was still in love with Deborah, and after Deborah's shooting, she starts to get better, at which point somehow, this would also require a lot of suspension of disbelief, somehow Quinn arranges for Deborah Morgan's body to be replaced and for her to be shown to be alive. Now, the more I go into it, the more implausible it seems. The whole idea is that the woman who died in that bed is not Deborah, but that is Mission Impossible levels of flesh mask identity theft, which I think is just no. I just want Deborah Morgan back in the show in some form where she might have lived on because of some switcheroo. Because she is sorely missed. In the category of people that we miss or the show misses, Deborah Morgan is on top of that list for me and for a lot of other people who consider her death to be one of the most unnecessary ones, and the ones that were not built up nearly enough for the death to be meaningful or significant or easy to digest or be satisfied with. So that is that. Now I'll give some comments on the overall state of the art of the Dexter franchise and closing thoughts on the season. Dexter Resurrection Season 1 is supposed to be one of many, at least 3 seasons in this run, which I can see happening. The way this finale and Justice for All, titled Justice for All and Justice for All, the way this wrapped up, this could have been a complete series finale, and yet it signaled a new beginning, which I definitely enjoy much more as an idea, as long as they show the same regard and foresight and respect to the material that they have. And I'm saying that in spite of the what I believe to be missteps in the form of Batista's demise, the way and the convenience in which Gemini II perished. But there are too many good things to take those to be indicators or harbingers for negative elements to come. And yet I might be being very optimistic. But I'm in for the ride. Dexter Resurrection has, fittingly, not ironically, fittingly resurrected the character and the legacy of the show. I don't look at this as another excuse to end Dexter in any way. I think they will have learned a lot of lessons from the way that they thought to end the franchise. Then real-world implications being that Dexter is a beloved character, ranking very high on syndication cable and reruns, suggests that this is nowhere near the end. And even if this run were to conclude, this would never be thought of as a way to conveniently kill off Dexter Morgan's character. So I believe we are strapped in for quite a few seasons to come, assuming the quality is somewhere near this season. Which brings me to the things that served as pillars upon which the season has rested as one of the best seasons in the 10 cumulative, maybe even 11 total seasons of Dexter. Well, let's do 8 original. Original Sin 1, that's 9. New Blood, that's 10. So if you include Original Sin, this was the 11th season of Dexter. But Original Sin did not have Michael C. Hall on screen, so do with that what you may. This is probably, and this is just a day removed after watching the finale, so I might alter my rankings. At this moment, it rests easily with season... let's do it. 1, 4, 2, 5, and 7. Okay, those are the strong seasons. I would put it right below 1 and 4. And I've not said 3, even though 3 is probably the season with Miguel Prado. Oh my. So yeah, Dexter's bad seasons are also very strong, some of them at least. The ending is where they messed up. Not in case of Resurrection, though. So, my concern moving forward for the franchise is very simple. I have reason to believe that this season was bolstered significantly by good characters, yes, and yet some contrivances, such as Blessing being too quick to believe that unassuming, seemingly nice person, Red, or Dexter, would be worthy to offer an apartment to right below where you live, in the context of the times when there's a killer, serial killer, on the loose who is taking out cab drivers. So that is one contrivance. Then you've got the entire concept of Prator's life, where he accumulates serial killers and successfully ropes in the police department, is known to be a philanthropist while having humble beginnings without any nepotistic inherited wealth. He's an orphan himself somehow, if I remember correctly. So all that. Then the second Gemini kill for me has been far-fetched as well. So all of that is still a minority pile. Is part of a minority pile. The positives of this season are bolstered significantly by this whole existence of a serial killer group, and I think that trope or that thread will continue in the form of the files that Dexter stole from Prator's vault, which will serve as targets for him moving forward. But I'm not sure what will provide substance to material that is yet to come. I am happy to be, well, not even surprised. I would not be surprised. I'm just concerned about that, because this season needed to be very strong, so they brought in the serial killer group. They brought in Prator. They brought in actors at a very high stature, which shows that the franchise, has a lot of legs left, has a lot of gas left in the tank, metaphorically speaking. It just reasons to be confident and yet to be carefully confident. So those are my thoughts in their entirety. A minute and 15 seconds is an hour and 15 minutes is where we land, more or less. This is Duncan Lievi, and these are my initial thoughts. Some rambling in there, and yet I just wanted it to be long form because I just wanted to sit and maybe even narrate my thoughts while learning more about the thoughts themselves in the process of sharing them with you. Thank you for listening if you did.